Hello and welcome back to the channel for another Doctor Who 60th anniversary themed video. Now I've previously covered basically all of the announcements, all the filming, etc. And most recently we've had the news about Neil Patrick Harris joining the cast as some sort of villain. I think RTD is described on Instagram as the greatest villain the Doctor has ever faced. And I've covered that already. I did a sort of initial reaction to that news yesterday at the time of recording as soon as it was announced. But it was only sort of partway through the recording of that video, towards the end of that video, and then afterwards as well, that ideas were starting to formulate in my mind about what could be going on here in terms of plot-wise and who Neil Patrick Harris could be playing. And essentially, my best guess at the moment is that he's playing the Celestial Toymaker, a villain from the first Doctor's era, from 60s Who. But yeah, I sort of wanted to discuss that and those ideas a little bit more in depth in this video, and also sort of connect it to what's been going on more broadly in terms of the filming and the announcements and stuff, and just put a bunch of stuff together to sort of come up with a very preliminary, very initial, very early prediction essentially of what the plot of this story and what the plot of this character, this villain, be it the Celestial Toymaker or something else entirely, could actually be. So this video will of course contain spoilers and potential spoilers for Doctor Who's 6th anniversary, and it's going to draw on filming stuff we've seen at filming, and stuff that's going on right now actually as we speak and as this video goes out, because I'm recording this the day before a big location shoot in Bristol, and there's been some setup today and bits and pieces going on, some set dressing, some very, very exciting things, which, yeah, would seem to sort of corroborate my theories, perhaps. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that, and indeed, as this video goes out, you may already know a bit more than I do, because I'm recording this in advance. But yeah, without further ado, let's get on to my main ideas about what could be going on here. So there are essentially two strands to my thoughts and feelings about what this could all be about, basically. I'll go with the least obvious one first, I think, just because, you know, it makes sense to do that, to tell you the least obvious ideas that perhaps other people haven't yet suggested. So basically, whether this character is the Celestial Toymaker or not, the whole vibe that I get from this image of him, of Neil Patrick Harris, presumably, you know, in character, in costume, as whoever this villain is this sort of workshop, carpenter, toymaker type character. Which isn't exactly an original thing to say. Lots of people have been saying similar sort of stuff. But particularly the thing that draws my attention in that image is the row of tools he's got there in some sort of pocket, presumably, which is obscured and off camera or whatever, in his apron. And there's like a little pair of pliers or something there on the left of the image. Now this is potentially a bit of a leap here, perhaps, but the whole thing about like carpenters and toy makers and what have you is that obviously they deal with making toys and tools and stuff and whatever and bits and pieces and miniature bits and pieces. I mean, look at those glasses he's got there on the bridge of his nose there, obviously for very close and detailed work that a toy maker or a carpenter or whatever would have to do. I mean, more broadly, you know, what is a toy but like a plaything or a sort of imitation of a person or of a thing, you know, of an animal or whatever. Basically, where I'm going with this is the idea that, you know, if you think about it like a sad old Doctor Who collector like me with action figures and stuff, you know, playing around with them, like Stephen Moffat in the Five-ish Doctors reboots, what I think could potentially be going on here, you know, be this character the Celestial Toymaker or not, is some sort of plot which involves either like miniaturizing the Doctor and his companions or just whatever, and like using them as like chess pieces almost on a chessboard and like controlling them and maybe like putting them in different worlds and things. Or maybe something less literal that just involves using like imitations or like voodoo dolls of the Doctor and company to like control their movements and their behaviour and stuff, and to like manoeuvre them around, again like chess piece on a chessboard. A similar sort of idea, some sort of vibe to the Five Doctors, the 20th anniversary special of Doctor Who from 1983. And obviously if you've seen that story, you'll know that the villain of the piece, who I won't spoil just in case you haven't seen it and you want to find out for yourself, but the villain of the piece uses these, like, you know, figurines or statuettes or chess pieces, if you like, of the Doctor and companions to manoeuvre them into place and sort of realise his dastardly plan. And so, a similar sort of thing could be going on here, I think, where this character is, maybe the Celestial Toymaker, maybe something else, which is just like riffing on those similar sort of ideas. Because I've seen it as well suggested he could be like the Master of the Land of Fiction from another 60s story, the Mind Robber, which obviously played around with lots of strange ideas like that, of like fairy tales and stuff, the Doctor coming into contact with Rapunzel and like fairy tale knights and stuff, and weird things like that. But yeah, whatever the case, be this an original character who's just riffing on similar ideas that we've seen before, or indeed, a character or a villain from the classic series who's making a reappearance here, like the Toymaker or the Master of the Land of Fiction. That is the vibe I'm getting. Look at that photo of Neil Patrick Harris in character. Look at those tools in his apron. Look at the glasses he's wearing. Look at the whole angle of this shot as well. It's almost like we're looking up at him, which, I guess, more broadly speaking, makes him look quite imposing. But it could also be a subtle hint to this whole idea of miniaturization and the Doctor being miniaturized, and this villain looking down on him like he's looking down on us in the photo and sort of maneuvering the Doctor around like some sort of chess piece. And there is actually something in the press release that accompanied this announcement which could tie into this idea. So Russell says in his little quote, just a very short quote, but he says, "The stuff we're shooting now is off the scale." Now obviously, like at face value, that is just like a standard turn of phrase, nothing particularly remarkable or extraordinary. But then it could also be a very deliberate choice of words, to refer to the whole idea of scale, off the scale. Does this mean it's a subtle hint to this whole idea of miniaturization and things literally being like out of scale with each other, perhaps? I don't know, but it's just something that I couldn't help but think, when I went back to that press release with these ideas sort of forming in my head. So it could be a load of rubbish, or there could be something in that, perhaps. So the other strand to this is the whole identity of this character, this villain. Is it the Celestial Toymaker? Is it the Master of the Land of Fiction? Is it something else entirely, or something riffing on those ideas? I mean, whatever the case, this whole idea of Neil Patrick Harris playing, some type of Toymaker or like workshop carpenter or whatever would seem to have been basically confirmed by what we've seen so far of this Bristol filming, which, like I said, at the time of recording hasn't yet taken place. But we have seen the set dressing, the setup for this location shoot, which includes this shop front for what basically looks to be a toy shop called Mr. Emporium. It says toys and tricks, fun and games, magic, games, tricks, all this stuff on the windows. I think it's got some German text there as well, puppets and bears and like board games and stuff. I don't know. I mean, obviously the whole idea of puppets could very much tie into the theory I was suggesting in the first half of this video. And of course, another thing to suggest in relation to that is the likeness of this new character or existing character or returning character or whatever, played by Neil Patrick Harris, to Geppetto, the carpenter from Pinocchio, from the Pinocchio story and films and whatever, the books, who of course made Pinocchio, and that whole idea of puppets and puppetry going on there. Could they be tapping into that whole like image of moving someone around like a puppet on strings, perhaps literally? It's certainly food for thought. But I think the other thing to say about all of this is that, of course, we have seen Beep the Meep spotted on set. That's all but been confirmed, really. And the Wrath Warriors as well. And the previous video I made on this topic, I think I accidentally butchered the pronunciation of that. I thought it was like the word Wrath, but it's actually spelt W-R-A-R-T-H. So presumably like more like Wrath or something like that. I don't know how you pronounce it. It's something from the comics. It's never been spoken on TV. I don't know. But there is this whole theory, possibly tying into the whole idea of this character being the Master of the Land of Fiction, actually, more than the whole theory of him being the Celestial Toymaker. But there is this theory, nevertheless, that all that stuff could tie into this some way. This whole idea of the special being set either partially or entirely in the land of fiction, so this metaphysical realm basically where anything goes, where you can like meet characters from fairy tales and stories and stuff, and there are basically no rules. As I say, that's an idea that's previously appeared in Doctor Who in 60s serial The Mind Robber. It's a serial that I haven't actually watched yet myself, so I only have a very sketchy understanding of it. But I believe it is basically like a very loose idea which the show could easily return to again. I think it already has actually in the expanded media, perhaps. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, it's something which they could very easily tap into to sort of explain away something like that. And so you could have this sort of like puppet master character playing around in all these different worlds and stuff. And if you tie this into the whole idea of like miniaturization and this character sort of controlling things like chess pieces on a board, you could have him mixing things up and taking characters from one world and plonking them into another one, like swapping things around and just creating chaos basically by mixing everything up and all the boundaries between these worlds, real and fictional. And I think that's a very appealing idea and something I'd definitely like to see, in Doctor Who, especially for the 60th anniversary. Although one thing to say, which I'm not sure people have quite thought through, perhaps, people have been suggesting this, is that, obviously, within the Doctor Who universe, there's no delineation between television Doctor Who and, like, comic strip Doctor Who and audio Doctor Who and books Doctor Who and novels and stuff. It's all Doctor Who. There's no, like, separation between those different mediums because, within the world of Doctor Who, everything just takes place in one world, so to speak. I mean, sure, there are like discrepancies, like you have parallel versions of the same story or the same event, like the Peter Cushing, Dalek films, for instance, from the 60s, which were essentially like remakes of 2 television Dalek serials, and presumably took place in some like parallel universe or something. Or the multiple endings for Ace, the companion, the last companion of the classic era, who like died in a comic or something, and then obviously in the main show is about to return in the upcoming centenary special, and there have been a whole host of other contradictory endings and sort of paths that she's gone on, and different accounts of what she got up to when she left the TARDIS, like did she go to Gallifrey and become a Time Lord or whatever, all these conflicting ideas. So it's not unheard of for this to happen in the Doctor Who universe, and there's no sort of easy answer to explain away which of those paths, which of those strands, which of those versions of events takes precedence. I mean, essentially, it's a case of what you believe to be canon when it comes to Doctor Who, but of course that's something which is very much, concerned with Doctor Who as a TV show, rather than Doctor Who as like an in-universe thing, and the characters and the stories themselves from an in-universe perspective. So in that regard, it would kind of be a bit weird if they made a point of Beep the Meep and the Wrath Warriors and whatever, all this sort of stuff, being from the comics, or like some alternate universal stuff, or like basically making some sort of attempt to explain away how this is happening, because like I say, from an in-universe perspective, these are all characters that the Doctor has met, and adventures they've been on, and etc, etc. Now that said, I don't think it actually rules out this theory. In fact, I think they could actually do something even more sophisticated and even more metafictional and weird with this whole idea, basically, and sort of almost canonise this idea of Doctor Who being told in different mediums. And that sounds like a weird thing to suggest. But the way I see it, they could basically actually, directly allude to the fact that these adventures, some of these villains the Doctor's met over the years, such as Beep the Meep, are sort of like, alternate timelines or parallel universes where, different things have happened to the Doctor in different universes almost, and like these different endings for Ace and etc. All these things running parallel to each other. And then basically take that idea and run with it and have that whole idea of this puppeteer character, this Toymaker, whoever he is, this villain, basically causing havoc by breaking down the boundaries between these worlds and mixing things up, as I've already suggested, and sort of directly alluding to it in that way. There's a potential there to do something quite clever and sort of have a metaphor for all these different mediums that Doctor Who's been told in over the 60 years, so far that it's been around for. And that'd be quite a fitting way, I think, to celebrate 60 years of Doctor Who. And also something which I can see Russell doing, because he's such a big fan of Doctor Who in all its forms. It would sort of make sense as like a next progression for an anniversary celebration to like directly refer to all these different forms that Doctor Who's been told in, like I say, to bring in the comics, the audios, whatever, and just go mad with it and sort of have this storyline about all these different universes, these different, this multiverse essentially, or Doctor Who, where all these stories have been told, all these adventures adventures have happened, but with slight differences to the timeline. Like for instance, one Doctor met Beep the Meep in his 4th incarnation. Another Doctor hasn't met him yet. Another Doctor meets him in this new David Tennant incarnation. You know what I mean? And as well, also the whole sort of Toymaker, land of fiction, puppeteer, whatever thing, this theory could very easily, very quickly explain away this whole idea of having David Tennant back. Because you could basically just say that this character, this villain, has caused trouble with the Doctor's regeneration and put a spanner in the works and caused them to regenerate and sort of de-regenerate back to a previous incarnation, and just explain it away that way. Now that would be enough of an explanation, I think, for me personally speaking. In short, in summary, basically, in terms of where I'm at the moment, I think this character, whether it is the Celestial Toymaker or the Master of the Land of Fiction or something completely different, something new entirely, whoever he is, I think he's going to be some sort of puppeteer, Toymaker type character who maybe miniaturizes the Doctor and company and sort of plays around with them like they're pieces on a chessboard. And that also, as part of this villain's plan, the story could directly allude to the whole idea of Doctor Who being told in different mediums over the years, sort of using like alternate realities or parallel universes or whatever as a metaphor for those different mediums. But what do you think about all this? Am I speaking a load of rubbish? Does this sort of chime with all your own thoughts and what you're thinking? Whatever the case, let me know, and let me know your theories down in the comments below and where you're up to with all this stuff as well. Because obviously, it's evolving all the time, it's changing, we're getting new information as filming is ongoing, new set photos, new announcements and stuff. So, none of this is set in stone. But this is sort of my best guess of what could be going on based on the information we've got so far. So yeah, please do let me know your thoughts on this and your own theories in the comments below. Please like the video if you've enjoyed it and enjoyed what I had to say, and subscribe to the channel for more stuff like this based around Doctor Who's 6th anniversary and news and theories and stuff, and a whole host of other stuff besides. And if you want to go one step further in supporting the content that I make, you can support me on Patreon via the link in the video description. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye for now.